Hi, Lisa K. Donner here, editor-in-chief of LibertyNation.com, and with me this evening is Scott D. Cosenza, our legal affairs editor. Scott, we just got the news that Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. What was your first reaction?
Fear for the ramifications for our country.
Meaning how?
Well, we have such turmoil and unrest in so many places in the country where normal political means seem to be thrown away in favor of violence. And because she was a strong ally of so many liberal political causes, and that Donald Trump may be able to appoint her successor, I feared it would result in more violence and strife.
All right, so let's talk about the politics of this, which are looming large with the election so close. First, give us some background about Bader Ginsburg, how long she was on the court, who she was appointed by, etc.
Sure. So she's the second woman ever to be appointed as a Supreme Court justice, and she was appointed by Bill Clinton. Some said that Hillary Clinton was the person who was the driving force behind her appointment. At the time of her appointment, she was a judge on the United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. And Bill Clinton had run into some trouble with some other nominees and some background check issues with them. And she was both a very safe choice because of her position on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. Her background had been vetted, and she had been approved unanimously, I think, for that position. And so she would be an easy nominee. And also she had very, very much true blue feminist and left-wing bona fides politically.
Right. So she was appointed by Clinton because she would be a safe liberal vote, and that turned out to be true.
Both a safe liberal vote and a likely safe passage through the nomination process, which also did prove to be true.
That's what I was going to ask you. Was Joe Biden, do you remember? You may not remember. Was he head of the Judiciary Committee when RGB came before?
If he wasn't the head, he was the minority leader. I did watch the Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I rewatched the Ruth Bader Ginsburg confirmation hearings this summer, as a matter of fact, Lisa, and he played a major part.
Just for fun, I'm sure.
And I have to tell you, it was more like a coronation than an investigative hearing. And part of that is because she had that position on the United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, which is commonly regarded as the court immediately beneath the Supreme Court within the federal structure. And so she'd already passed muster and proved herself to be, she's I think everybody says it, whether you agree with her or disagree with her, she's whip smart. And she also has zero in terms of character flaws or any kind of thing that, the other side of people's personality that might keep them from Supreme Court service. She's a top quality person, according to all who seem to deal with her.
So she was kind of at the proving ground for the Supreme Court.
Yes.
The feeding place where the most justices have come from?
Yes. Okay.
Now, before we get into her court record, let's talk a little bit about the politics of this. This is going to be, I think, possibly fairly incendiary because you have a situation of Trump has already put out a list of the people that he would nominate. And I don't believe Joe Biden has done that.
No, ma'am. And this,
but let me just say, I believe the liberals are going to say to themselves, well, if Trump gets to nominate one more, we are sunk for a number of generations. What's your reaction to that?
Well, that's certainly what they'll say. And that will also behoove them both for vote getting and the massive fundraising appeals that are sure to come from all sides of the political spectrum.
Do you think this will drive more Democrats or more Republicans to the polls? I just want to partially answer that and say I think it's going to drive a lot of Republicans to the polls because they care deeply about issues before the Supreme Court that have yet to be resolved, abortion being one of them.
Abortion, gun control, for sure. There are many out there. And the more that the Supreme Court decides these sort of societal issues, and by slim margins, the more that you would think should drive those votes. I don't have my political analyst crystal ball sharp enough to make the ruling on whether I think it's going to motivate more people on the left or the right to come out to the polls. But I know, Lisa, it will be a massive motivator.
Do you think he would put forth one name so that people could count on that before November 3rd?
Well, I would say
he has the right to do that.
Donald Trump, I thought his putting forth the list of names before the last presidential election was a welcome bit of sort of a new way to campaign and let the people in on that decision. You know, when the country was founded, the Supreme Court wasn't that important. And so the structure of how a Supreme Court justice comes to be didn't including the public in that way. But Donald Trump did include the public, Lisa, in the Supreme Court selection process when he said, these are the people who I'm going to consider. And I thought it was just as revolutionary as Newt Gingrich's contract with America. And I think that maybe we're going to see a reaction by Joe Biden where people might say, you know, who might you appoint to the Supreme Court, and demand a response there.
And by the way, Trump kept his promise.
Yes, he did. Yes.
Yeah.
And Trump, so Donald Trump, for people who don't know, Lisa, and this I think is for some folks who may not quite understand why a person who doesn't seem to exhibit a lot of conservative values personally is so buoyed by conservatives and supported by conservatives, is his work on the federal courts. Donald Trump has been a machine with placing judges on the federal courts, working with the Federalist Society and McConnell in the Senate. It has been a remarkably efficient machine to appoint conservative and libertarian judges on the federal courts.
Yeah, and that's very important. And we're starting, I think, to realize that. I think Bush 43 didn't do such a good job on that.
Well, also who he chose. I mean, depending on your politics, you don't want somebody to be a successful appointee, right? If you don't like their politics or their jurisprudence. Yeah.
Okay, let's go into one or two at most of Ruth Bader Ginsburg landmark cases.
Well, yes. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a majority author on a number of landmark cases or dissents. I think more recently, she wrote the dissent in the Hobby Lobby case. But I think, Lisa, her mark really upon the court comes more as an advocate rather than a justice. Now, she was a reliable vote, I think, for any kind of standard lefty politically charged issue. So if it was an abortion case, you could count on Ruth Bader Ginsburg to vote for increased abortion access almost always. And if it were, for instance, a gun control case, you could count on her to say that a more restrictive law didn't violate the Second Amendment, for instance. But when she was an advocate before the court, she really changed the law herself from the power that she used to make her force her arguments. And she was a very effective and brilliant advocate, and also her case selection process. Funnily enough, Lisa, she got one of her best ideas, she said, from her deceased husband, Marty Ginsburg. And what he said was that she should take gender discrimination cases where she could find a male who was discriminated against, so that a Supreme Court judgment would ultimately be able to favor breaking down sex barriers, but in a particular case awarding that win to a male plaintiff. And that would help judges who otherwise wouldn't be able to see it through the female eyes that she was bringing to the case, and break down some of those barriers. And she was quite successful. I think she won 6 out of 7 cases that she argued before the Supreme Court, and changed the law massively in the way that women and men are dealt with in the legal system.
Well, she certainly was a tiger for women's rights and feminism and all the leftist causes that go on with her point of view. But now we will have to face a world in which there will be no more Ruth Bader Ginsburg memes, which is going to be a sad day.
Well, I think you may be wrong about that. I think we may see an uptick, at least for the near term, in Ruth Bader Ginsburg memes and tattoos. I went to the National Jewish History Museum exhibit on Ruth Bader Ginsburg called the Notorious RBG, over the Thanksgiving holiday last year. And the status of her personality and icon status within that leftist political community, it's hard to underestimate for Supreme Court justices with tattoos and everything else. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, it really is. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I think this is going to be very interesting as the election approaches. It could actually even change the election.
You know, Lisa, before we go, I would just like to add that Ruth Bader Ginsburg, in this time of such hostility between people of different political stripes, one of her best friends in life and on the court was now deceased Justice Antonin Scalia, a stalwart conservative and no friend to her jurisprudence. But they managed to be great friends in life, and I think there's a lesson there for everybody across the political spectrum, that we can disagree without being disagreeable.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And I was going to mention that because I always thought it was interesting that Scalia and Ginsburg were so close. Well, thank you very much. Scott DeCostanza, Legal Affairs Editor for LibertyNation.com. I'm Lisa K. Donner. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Go deeper on the topic discussed in this video. Head on over to one of these links here or go to our Liberty Nation Roku channel. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for Liberty.